Who would thought that Iran is the one that get to decolonize West Asia? Trump is just buying time. I think he made a conflict in Western Pacific with China much less likely now, because if United States cannot take on Iran, forget about China. It's not going to happen. It's even more obvious now than ever. U.S. do not have what it takes to be a global hegemon. It cannot be at all places at all time. There's a lot of market irregularities. Just before Trump's tweet this Monday, before the market open Monday, people saw there was a huge bet, over $500 million bet to short oil and long stocks. This is so blatant. This is not the first time this has happened. This happened during the tariff war as well. People were making huge bets just before Trump made the news public. China is not happy because for China, its top priority is actually regional stability, and people also saw what U.S. priority is. You have South Korea. This is world's top 10 economy, yet U.S. just don't care about them. For U.S. the top priority always remain the golden boy, Israel. they don't care if you are they just realize all these so-called U.S. allies in the region. They just realize they're on the bottom of the food chain. Iran is emerging as a clear dominant regional power in West Asia.
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My guest today is the very popular Carl Jha, a man who got cancelled by YouTube only to be uncancelled because apparently even the YouTube algorithm missed him. He's the creator of the Silk and Steel podcast. It is a show that dives deep into Chinese history. It's a must listen if you want to understand China beyond the headlines. Carl brings a unique perspective through his deep historical lens and sharp analysis, and he has a knack for cutting through mainstream noise. He also regularly speaks with experts from around the world, dissecting complex issues with clarity, the kind of clarity that most of us only get after 3 or 4 coffees. So without further ado, the man who makes geopolitics feel like a casual conversation, Carl Jha. Thank you for being here, Carl. Great to be talking to you. How have you been?
Thank you, Ali. Thank you for that lovely intro. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. So, China must be very happy looking at what America is trying to do. And Trump's declared his fifth victory in 4 weeks now. So I'm guessing China must be thinking that, okay, if this is the victory that Trump likes, they've got nothing to worry about if they can't even handle Iran.
That's correct. But first of all, China is not happy because, for China, its top priority is actually regional stability because, China do have a lot of investment in the Gulf region. And right now, all that is being on hold. And so this is why China has issued multiple calls for return to negotiation. But of course, the real problem is the people who really started this conflict. This is Israel and United States. And, Trump has issued a statement. He said he will put on a hold on bombing of Iran's energy grid for about 10 days. This came right after he tweeted a couple of days ago, said he gave Iran 48 hours ultimatum. If Iran don't surrender, he will bomb Iran's energy grid. And Iran announced that if that happens, they will retaliate against regional desalination plants and energy grid in return. And of course, that will be a huge disaster for all the so-called U.S. allies in the region. And that's the reason Trump backed down. But one thing I'm a little bit worried is the Trump is just buying time because this is what Trump does. He, right before Monday, when the market opens in the United States, he will make a statement says, we won, the peace is coming, and the market rally, the oil falls. And then around Friday, when after the market closed, he will say, okay, we will resume bombing. And And this is not the first time he did it. There's a lot of market irregularities. Just before Trump's tweet this Monday, before the market open Monday, people saw there was a huge bet, over $500 million bet to short oil and long stocks. This is so blatant. This is not the first time this has happened. This happened during the tariff war as well. People were making huge bet just before Trump make the news public. But what I'm worried about is that beyond market manipulation, which is to be expected from someone like Trump, is Trump is buying time for the arrival of U.S. ground forces in the region, because we know that Trump has ordered the Marine Expeditionary Units from that was stationed in Okinawa, Japan, to sail toward toward Iran, and they will arrive in position in about 7 days' time, next week. And again, there's reports that the 82nd Airborne has also been deployed. And there's the news that Pentagon announced they're gonna now increase the age threshold for signing up for U.S. military to 42. That's great news. I'm sure it's probably nothing. This worries me because this is exactly how the Vietnam War started. Vietnam War, for people who don't know, the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. U.S. was always involved in Vietnam War, through support of the French. But the U.S. ground combat, U.S. involvement in the ground combat in Vietnam War started with Operation Rolling Thunder, which started with the fake false flag Gulf of Tonkin incident, which we now know is totally bogus. That Vietnam, in fact, did not attack the U.S. warship in the Gulf of Tonkin the second time, as they claim, but it was used as an excuse for the Congress to authorize U.S. military involvement. And the Operation Rolling Thunder was also designed to be a air campaign. And as they bombed North Vietnam extensively, all the infrastructure, railroad, power plants. But in order to support this air war against Vietnam in 1965, LBJ also sent 3,500 U.S. Marines to Da Nang to secure the airports there. And just a few years later, that figure blow up from 3,500 to 500,000 U.S. troops. And that's not including all the U.S. allies, from South Korea, from Australia, from all these other U.S. client states that were sent to the region. So we could potentially be, looking at a second Vietnam War right now. This is why I think the market was reacted prematurely to Trump, like they always do. They keep on hoping we're going to return to normal in a few days. I don't think that's happening. We might be in this for the long haul. So even if the peace negotiation take place today and Iran to announce the Strait of Hormuz is to open today, it will take month to restore all the energy infrastructure in the region. So in the meantime, many countries in the world, they do not have month-long supply of fuel. I saw places like India, they're a few days away from running out of their supply of fuels. There's places like Philippines, South Korea, Japan, that's heavily dependent on hydrocarbon coming from the Gulf. Some countries are better shielded. Japan do have a bit of a strategic oil reserve, but other country, not so lucky. So this could have dire consequences for the global economy because fuel is not only needed for transportation, but hydrocarbon is also what we use to make plastics and chemical fertilizers. Now it's a planting season. It's spring. The farmers are, right now is trying to plant the crop for this coming year, and they need a lot of fertilizers. And by this the one major component for the fertilizer is nitrogen. That's extracted from the gas in Middle East, and the world gets 20% of its natural gas supplies from Qatar. That supply has been taken completely offline now, and beyond fertilizers, which could potentially cause famine, we also have a shortage of helium. Again, it's also synthesized from gas from the Gulf, mostly from Qatar, which means without helium, Taiwan semiconductors cannot make advanced semiconductor chips, which it's pretty dire for the AI bubble. Actually, that might be a good thing, because all these to sustain the current AI bubble in the United States, they have to constantly build more data centers and consume more microchips. But the helium supply is simply not there. This is the reason why U.S. has waived sanction against both Russia and Iranian oil and gas, because United States realized that they need to increase supply to their so-called partner countries, especially the countries in Asia. Australia is days away from running out of jet fuel. They depend 32% of their jet fuel from imports from China, and China just said, "Hey, we can't export now. We have to keep all the fuels to ourselves." So China banned the export of refined petroleum products like gas, diesel, and jet fuel. So Australia right now is in talks with Singapore in trying to secure their jet fuels. And yeah, it's gonna be pretty bad for a lot of people around the globe. We but then we have a doofus in the White House that's just spending all this time manipulating the markets, and he seems to be committed to send the ground force now, because I was hoping that was his hardball negotiation tactic, but the amount of the troop movement that's headed toward West Asia make it seem unlikely. But nevertheless, it will be a disaster. People will say, "Well, okay, 3,500 Marines, and to add more 82nd Airborne, some special forces won't make much difference." That's true. It's true, but this is the thing. When they went into Vietnam War, Pentagon also knew this is a war they cannot win. They know it's going to be a war of attrition that they cannot win, yet they keep on plowing resource into it because there's no political will to stop it. And for people who are younger, like our generation, people would have remembered Obama's surge, right? That is the same idea. Let's just let's just increase our forces to do one last push, and we'll break the Taliban. And that this is the most dangerous thing right now, that U.S. will keep climbing this escalation ladder that will widen the war. And for Israel, they have been calling this war for decades. They finally got a U.S. president who is either gullible or compromised enough to go forth with it. Since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, 7 U.S. presidents have resisted Israeli pressure to go to war with Iran, because everyone knew it would be disastrous because Iran will be able to close down the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a secret. Everybody knew about it. But I think now we have reports coming out that Trump was basically being briefed on the progress of war by like essentially TikTok reels, right? The people compilation short clips from Pentagon strikes and telling him we're making progress, we're hitting Iran hard, and that give him the illusion of victory, or that the victory is at hand. And also, I think their previous operation against Venezuela also gave them make them overconfident. They thought they could replicate their success by doing a decapitation strike against Iranian senior leadership, and then the rest of the Iranian government will fall in line. What they haven't accounted for is, people in Iran in particular, they have a culture of martyrdom. And that's what we saw. Senior leader Khamenei, he did not hide in a bunker. He went through his normal life. In his last moment, he spent it with his family, with his daughter, granddaughter, and son-in-law when they were all killed, because he probably accepted what was coming. He was 86 years old. He knew his death will turn him into a martyr, will be a rally cry for the Iranians. And that's exactly what happened. Now we have reports coming out that says Mossad was extensively involved in stirring up the Iranian civil unrest, the protests that happened preceding to the war. And after the war started, ordinary Iranians have all rallied around the flag. Protests disappeared from the street. They all have solidified their support around their government. Don't believe what those Iranian diaspora are saying from America or Sweden. They do not represent the majority of Iranian people who are very patriotic about their country. So at this point, the whole war aim of starting this conflict, which for Israel was to destabilize Iran and possible regime change, is looking increasingly unlikely. And now they have tried to shift their goalposts by saying the goal is now to open the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, was open before they started attacking Iran. And I think Marco Rubio just made another remark, says, Iran could open Strait of Hormuz tomorrow. Well, of course, we all know that water is wet. Iran has proven itself to be a major power through this conflict. There's a quote from the book Dune by the protagonist Paul Atreides. He said, "Those who can destroy a thing controls it." Well, Iran just proved to the whole world they actually do control the Strait of Hormuz. They control the flow of hydrocarbons coming out of the Gulf, and that's what United States have to deal with right now. This is a disaster for the whole world. But there's some silver lining, like you pointed out. The fact that U.S. is getting its nose bloody in the Gulf makes it less likely that we'll try something stupid with China, because China has magnitude more missiles and more advanced missiles. All these U.S. bases has gone up in smoke in West Asia. Guess what? Though that will be the fate of U.S. bases throughout East Asia, whether in Korea, Japan, or the Philippines. So now all these so-called U.S. ally countries have to reevaluate their relationship with the empire. Do they want to be a target? The whole premises of joining the U.S.-led imperial system is that U.S. is supposed to extend their security umbrella to protect you. But now the reality is it's the opposite. It's the U.S. being participating in the U.S. empire makes it a liability rather than protection. And right now, U.S. is literally stripping its military asset in East Asia in order to ship them to West Asia to confront Iran. You have the THAAD interceptors being dismantled in South Korea. They're sending the Marines that were stationed in Okinawa again toward Iran. And people also saw what U.S. priority is. You have South Korea. This is world's top 10 economy. Yet U.S. just don't care about them. For U.S. the top priority always remain the golden boy, Israel. they don't care if you are like they just realize all these so-called U.S. allies in the region. They just realize they're on the bottom of the food chain. They are not that important on the U.S. priority list. They cannot compete for attention with Israel. That will also have to make them to reevaluate their relationship with United States. The Philippines, which has been a linchpin of U.S. strategy to contain China in South China Sea. The Filipino president Bongbong Marcos just announced that he wished to have a reset of the relationship with China, and he is hoping to restart the joint cooperation between China and the Philippines to explore oil and gas, drill for oil and gas in South China Sea. Well, because Philippines is desperate. They don't have a large reserve, and they heavily depend on the fuel coming out of the Gulf. So now, this is the reason for Bongbong Marcos to do the 180 terms to say, okay, China, let's be friends again. Let's drill for oil in our region. This is gonna have a lot of geopolitical ramifications all around the world. First, it shows that U.S. empire system is essentially a paper tiger, and two, the Iran is emerging as a clear dominant regional power in West Asia, and on top of that, U.S. is the one that's screwing everybody right now. I'm going on rant, so feel free to step in anytime
No,
with
no,
your
that's okay.
questions.
It's great. It's great. But I mean, imagine what Iran could have done if it hadn't been sanctioned. Because I've always maintained Iranians are very smart people, and there is a reason why they have never been colonized. They had a Persian Empire, and I was talking to Larry C. Johnson, ex-CIA analyst and a spy. He said that, and I talked to him in January. He told me in January that there will be an attack on Iran by Israel and USA. He was very confident because of his inside sources. But he said that in order for Israel and US to make meaningful destruction and regime change, they need to send at least 1 million troops in Iran, and they have to be prepared for heavy casualties. Israel is not going to send any troops in Iran, so it has to be allies, Australia, UK, America, who would have to send 1 million people. But even if you send 1 million people, the topography is such that hilly areas, all that kind of stuff, landmines, it's not. It's like Vietnam on steroids, and like you rightly said, I mean, Pentagon knew they would never win in Vietnam, but because of the military-industrial complex pressure that was pumping money, I mean, there was printing money actually. They didn't want to pull out, and uh, if you look at America's achievements right now, what they've done is in Afghanistan they've replaced Taliban with Taliban after 20 years. In Iran, they replaced a Khomeini with Khomeini after 6 days. And like you mentioned, Strait of Hormuz was open, so they managed to close it for themselves and for their allies. And now the objective has shifted that they want to open it, which was already open before the war. So I I think Trump didn't really think that Iranians would fight back, uh, and I think the advice and information that he was getting from his uh, close circle friends was that, okay, if you decapitate, everything would collapse like it did in Venezuela. But Iranians are smart people. If you look at their different layers of government and decentralized way of fighting the war, they've proven that they're very smart people. I mean, in science and technology as well, and military know-how. And it's their country; they know how to defend it. I mean, what do you
Look at their
do? I mean,
leadership. Look at their
Correct.
leadership. They're all like PhD in Kantian
Exactly.
philosophy.
Yeah.
I don't think Donald Trump has read a book in his life. Maybe his own books are the deal.
Which he
There's
didn't
a
write
fake.
himself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure. I'm sure he did not write. I mean, it's a joke. The people like Trump and Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Secretary of War, they were literally TV show hosts. U.S. is
Correct.
literally ruled by bad TV personalities right now, and Iran's leaders are all like philosophers, engineers, and highly educated. And this is an asymmetric warfare right here. U.S. was able to do what it could is because U.S. itself has abundant natural resources. U.S. is blessed geographically by having two oceans as its mode. So U.S. homeland, mainland USA, is very secure. But because of this, U.S. government feel it has the leeway to cause great disruptions all around the world. But there will be blowback. There's blowback already in terms of rising prices. The because the global economy is all connected. When oil is a global traded fungible commodity. When you cut off supplies from 20% of the world's supplies, the price is going to rise worldwide. Not just outside the United States, but in U.S. as well. U.S. oil company might make a lot of money, but the ordinary working class American, they were going to have to pay the price. And again, like I said, the fertilizer issue is probably the most important right now because a lot of people depended on those fertilizers, and now they're no longer coming. uh this this is really really bad. And people like Trump, I think the problem is they actually knew. There are people in U.S. who knew what Iran's capability are. They have done war games against Iran multiple times, and it all ended up with U.S. getting its nose bloodied. And we notice the result of the war games because it has been extensively reported in mainstream media. And Wall Street Journal during the last 12-day war also reported that U.S. has depleted its missile interceptors by 25%. There's that missile interceptor were down by 25% in the 12 days war. Now we're in what, day 26, day 27 of this new war, and now there's the reports coming out. 1/3 of their 1/3 of their missile interceptor has been used up. So U.S. is going to have serious issue to even continue this air war campaign because they're running out of missile interceptors. Iran has been very very good this time, even compared to the 12 days war, because they took out all the radars. So all the U.S. air defense are going blind. There's that. Their $1 billion THAAD launchers is useless without radar. And Iran know where to hit, what to hit. They have so the THAAD launchers. United States have deployed total of 11 all around the world. Iran was able to take out the radars of four THAAD launchers in the Gulf region. This is why United States have to dismantle their THAAD system from South Korea and ship them to West Asia. And we know Iran has more missiles, and Iran can make more because they have taken shipments from China from of the chemical precursors that's necessary to make more missiles. This was reported again in Wall Street journals. China has shipped Iran with material to make missiles both before and after the 12 days war, whereas China still maintain a rare earth ban on United States military-industrial complex. So each THAAD missile, each Patriot missile they use up, they're not going to be able to replenish them anytime soon. And that is asymmetric warfare, and this is why they're now have they're trying to escalate. I saw Israel just attacked the Iranian ports in the Caspian Sea. That's where Iran was getting supplied by Russia through the Caspian Sea, and that's a little bit concerning. I think I suspect that Israel may have got it access through airbase to countries like Azerbaijan, allow them to fly them through. Because if you look at their air campaign so far, most of their hits up to this point has been concentrated on the west side of Iran. So what that means is they do not have air superiority over Iran yet. They have their planes load up with standoff munitions like cruise missiles that fly as close as possible to the Iranian border and then launch those cruise missiles. And their cruise missile supply is also limited. Their standoff munitions also getting diminished. So the U.S. hope, well, according to Pete Hegseth, is we will gain air superiority over Iran in the coming days. Well, he said that last week. So far, that still hasn't happened. That they were hoping like once they gain air superiority over Iran, they will be able to fly their plane directly inside the Iranian airspace, and they will be able to use down bombs. Those bombs that don't have guidance system or even the laser guided bombs. Not the cruise missiles, which is much more expensive to manufacture and hard for them to replenish. The U.S. still have plenty of a lot of in their arsenal that has plenty of down bombs. But so far that has not happened. They have, even a month into the war, they have not gained air superiority inside the Iranian airspace. And Iran saw that they have answers, even to stealth fighters such as F-35. This is why they have been doing what U.S. have been doing what they're doing. They try to just get close as Iranian border, fire some missiles, and run away. And even so, they still keep on losing planes. I just saw another report of F-18 going down. More F-15s are going down. So Iran still maintain credible air defense even a month into the war. So that's very impressive. I hope they keep going. But the ground invasion is just a fantasy. They deploy. Let's remember, they had an extensive air campaign against North Vietnam. They bombed everything: schools, hospitals, railroad factories, and they deployed 500,000 American troops into Vietnam. I'm not even counting the Allied troops, and yet they could not win. They could not win. Vietnam, during the time of Vietnam War, has a much smaller population, and it's also much smaller geographically than Iran. Iran is actually a big country. It's a country of 90 million people, and it has very unforgiving terrains. So it's the whole idea that somehow they're gonna send their troops to march on Tehran. That's a fantasy. That's just not gonna happen.
Correct.
What they might do is they might, if they were going to do a ground operation, they have talked about taking over Kars Island, where most of the Iran's 90% of Iran's oil export facility is located. But if you look at the map, the Kars Island is deep inside the Persian Gulf. They have to somehow make their way through the gauntlet of Strait of Hormuz in order to even travel there. It's and it's very close to the Iranian coast. So I'm thinking that all this talk about U.S. going after Kars Island might be a smokescreen, might be a distraction. That being announcing this way ahead in advance, but they might go after Chabahar ports, which is outside of the Strait of Hormuz, with open access to the Indian Ocean. Their has relatively more flatter terrain, so they might attempt to take over the Chabahar port and try to push inland from there. But again, even there, it's a fool's errand because one of the difficulty for Iran to develop Chabahar port all these years, despite its excellent location and despite it being an excellent natural harbor, is because it's relatively isolated from the rest of the country. You have to cross a huge expanse of desert to go anywhere. That is actually the route Alexander the Great took on his way back to Persia when he decided to retreat from the Indus Valley, and he lost anywhere between a quarter to a third of his forces, just wandering through the desert. This is, okay, we have modern logistics now, but it's still a very difficult task. And I also have to remind people, even for U.S. to deploy 1 million troops is to West Asia is fantasy. In the Gulf during the Iraq War, U.S. was able to deploy 250,000 troops, through by stationing them in places like Saudi Arabia and all the other Gulf countries. But back then, U.S. even U.S. had a lot more army transport ships that made the logistics possible. Well, right now it's now we're like a quarter century away from the start of the Iraq War. They don't even have this number of ships that possess during 2003 anymore. They simply lack the kind of the logistic capability they had before. And so far, remember in the Bush had his coalition of willing, but so far, I think I don't know, maybe they can get a couple of Baltic countries to sign up. I don't see how they're gonna finagle to drag the other country along with it. They did manage to get UK to allow US
Correct.
to use their bases, but I cannot see they convince the other NATO country to send ground troops. I mean, even if they do, US is the largest military inside NATO. If US cannot do it, by attacking along some French and German ships and a few thousand forces from these ally countries, it's not going to make a difference. It's
Germans are busy fighting Russians in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Germans, they're having difficulty getting their own people to join the army because their own people are saying, "Why are we going to fight Russians in Ukraine?" So I think the geopolitical shift that may happen is very, very telling because in Australia, what they are saying is that Australia is not ready for a war if an attack happens on Australia. Now they know that America is not going to help them. Now they know America is not there. America was never anybody's ally. All these countries that call America an ally, all these countries, I call them watchdogs or lapdogs of America. So they've seen how America has taken the TAT system from South Korea and given it to Israel. America hasn't even defended its own military bases in the Gulf countries. In fact, it has transferred the defense system to Israel. Its main priority, like you mentioned, is to protect Israel, not its allies, the Gulf countries that actually pay America, not the Gulf countries that invest $2 trillion in America. So there's another point I make is
it's worse than being lapdogs because one of the famous Taiwan talk show host who has passed away, Liao, who made a good point. He said, America want Taiwan to be its attack dogs in East Asia against China. But have you ever, even if, but we're worse than being dogs. You know what? Because owners at least feed their dogs. They at least give the dogs food and doggy treat. We in Taiwan are expected to pay for American weapons. What kind? Yeah, I never heard of watchdogs being forced to pay for their own food. And so we're worse than treated than dogs. So that is a predicament of the so-called U.S. allies right now. Australia, they're being paying through the nose for this AUKUS program, which is supposedly going to give Australia a nuclear submarine, I don't know, in the 2040s.
It's never going to happen.
I mean, but what it really does is it give United States access to Australia. So Australia have to construct a nuclear submarine capable ports in Perth. And in the meantime, U.S. submarine will be able to base there. So U.S. is making Australia pay for the privilege of hosting U.S. troops on its soil. And again, what does that do? That make Australia a target. It paint Australia as a target if a war does break out with China. It's the same thing. You look at what's happening to Dubai, to all the GCC country right now, to Qatar, to Kuwait. They're coming under attack by barrage of Iranian missiles, and China have magnitude more missiles than Iran with further range and better technology. So I think, again, I said the silver lining of this is that I think it makes a conflict in Western Pacific with China much less likely now. Because if United States cannot take on Iran, forget about China. It's not going to happen.
That's true.
And this is why I have always maintained the so-called pivot to Asia is just a slogan. It's never going to happen. People need to realize, a lot of the people, even in the resistance, they still picture U.S. as this omnipotent being that can be anywhere at any time, do anything. No. U.S. still have to obey the law of physics, the law of supply and demand, and law of logistics. They still face resource constraint, and it's even more obvious now than ever. U.S. do not have what it takes to be a global hegemon. You cannot be at all places at all time. And it's been challenged by Iran. Who would thought? Who would thought that Iran is the one that get to decolonize West Asia? U.S. and NATO troops are now pulling out of Iraq after 26 years, 23 years, and it's due to Iran's and Iran supported Iraqi militias. Finally, the only presence they have now is in the northern Iraq, in the Iraqi Kurdistan area. I think this is Iran's demand for ending the war is also for U.S. to pull out the region, which I never thought would see happen. But I just don't see any other way around for U.S. not, because there's still. I mean, U.S. can choose to prolong this war, just because simply U.S. still have a lot of resources. Its homeland is not under attack, but it's gonna make all the U.S. allies in the region and around the world to pay an increasingly steep price. And that put incredible strain on the U.S. empire system.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that is coming out of this is because China, like you mentioned, controls the rare earth supply. It also controls the supply of tungsten, has a higher melting point, and is used in weapons. So by stifling the supply of tungsten, it's making it really difficult for Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, companies like that to manufacture weapons that use tungsten. So they might run out of these weapons very soon. Also, it hasn't really dented Iran's oil revenues at all, because prior to the war, Iran, I think, was exporting 1.1 million barrels at $40. Now it's exporting 1.5 million barrels per day at $90-something. So, I mean, they've just doubled their oil revenue in a span of 4 weeks. I mean,
and they got their sanction lifted. They got the U.S. sanction against them lifted.
Exactly. So this is all going topsy-turvy for America, which is why all this, and also America is a very corrupt country. So they've asked for $200 billion. How much of that $200 billion would go into the pocket of, corrupt military people? Because Pentagon hasn't even passed a single accounting audit. So they will need more and more money, I guess. So it's not looking really good for America.
Well,
And
I mean, this is that how this war shows it. Iran has a
yeah,
much smaller defense budget than United States, and they are and there's not much U.S. can do uh, right now, because the whole point of U.S. military industrial complex is not to win wars. Uh, Assange pointed this out back during the
yeah,
Afghanistan war. He said, no, they're not in it to win. The whole point of Afghanistan war is not to win in Afghanistan. The whole point is to wash vast sum of money from the tax bases of North America and Europe into the pocket of a small group of transnational security elite. This is why they locked up Assange. This is why they put him in
correct.
solitary confinement, because he spoke the truth.
Yeah,
That's and this we're seeing right now. With
yeah,
the U.S. has four the most advanced aircraft carrier in the U.S. Navy. Now it's being towed back to ports, and they
back.
say it's going to
Yeah,
be it might take 14 months to repair the damage, which just means it's
yeah,
probably going to be out of service for 2 years. And the official narrative is still it's caused by a laundry room fire, but a laundry room fire that took them 30 hours to put out and burn up all the beds of the sailors, and they have to
yeah,
sleep on deck, and it will take them 2 years to fix. I mean,
yeah,
at this point, it's less embarrassing for them just to admit the Iranianness at us than to come up
correct.
with all these crazy stories. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, we are. I mean, yeah. So the sad part is the world will have to suffer, because
correct.
the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. But the silver lining is that we are now seeing the limit of the U.S. empire, and I think this is the beginning of an end of the U.S. empire presence in West Asia. I just don't see a way for them to achieve their goal, which is either regime change or complete destabilization of Iran at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, what it has shown the world is that there might be shifting global alliances, and also the rise of Petroyuan. So Iran has said, okay, they're taking one petrodollar, they're cutting out petrodollar, and apparently countries are paying in one. India paid in one, Pakistan, obviously, many other countries are paying in one. So I think again, America has single-handedly destroyed its reputation, and American problems are of their own making. Uh, this was an easily avoidable situation, but I think Israel still wants war, and Netanyahu said that
Oh yeah,
the war is going to end when we tell the war ends. So I don't think America can do anything
I
because
mean this
Israel
is
is still.
why this is
Yeah,
why Israel has pushed into southern Lebanon right now. The AP
yeah,
just said, "Oh, we're now going to officially call Israel incursion into southern Lebanon a invasion. Here's the
yeah,
reason." I'm like, look, so you're finally reporting the facts, and you're telling us why you're now reporting the facts. But for Israel's goal has always been that they never mince words about it. They have always been pushing for the greater Israel project.
yeah,
Iran remained the biggest obstacle for them to realize their greater Israel from Niles to Euphrates. So this is why you even have the Israeli minister coming out and say, "Oh, Turkey will be next," because the Turkey is after Iran, Turkey will be the last regional power standing in the way of Israel.
yeah,
This is nuts. This is completely nuts. But we also know that Israel by itself cannot do it. They
yeah,
lack the capability to do it. This is why they have to drag the United States into it. They succeeded. They succeeded this time. I mean, I can't imagine, what kind of material they have over Trump. This must be some really ghastly stuff in the Epstein files that haven't been released. But here we are. United States is destroying itself, its own empire, again for its golden boy Israel. I mean, I because this is a war. This is an existential war for Iran. It's a war of its own choosing for the United States. Iran does not present an existential threat to the United States. That Trump chose to start this war, and mostly for Israel. That this will end badly. I mean, without
This will,
United States, if U.S. do withdraw
yeah,
from West
yeah.
Asia, I mean, Israel will have to fend for itself. I mean, it's I
I
don't
think.
think it will be able to confront Iran on its own.
Oh no way!
We'll
I
have to
think
see.
Israel is good at. Yeah, Israel is good at killing innocent, unarmed civilians. It has never sent its army in any other country. Like it didn't send its army in Iraq, in Libya, not in Iran also. But I was listening to Colonel Douglas McGregor from America. He said that Israel's defenses are down, and 8 out of 10 Iranian missiles are landing on targets in Israel now every day. So that's massive, 80% hit rate from Iran. So I mean, they are suffering, but I think they
Well,
don't want to end the war because they see this as their only chance to
yes,
destabilize Iran. But what's also
yes,
telling is all these Gulf countries, UAE and Saudi Arabia came out a couple of days ago, and they still say that they want more American military bases. So there is
yeah.
absolutely no Arabian pride. I mean,
This
have
I
some
think this
pride.
is it's like this is a lost investment fallacy. Sunk investment
Sunk, yeah, yeah,
fallacies because
sunk cost,
they
yeah,
have
sunk cost, yeah,
been tied themselves on the American war wagon for so long.
yeah,
They base them, the whole post-war security order in West Asia depended on their client relationship with the United States, including the support for the petrodollar, because as you mentioned, finance is one of the main leg of the U.S. empire, other than military and technology, right?
yeah,
And for them, they have too much invested in United States, and they just can't see themselves letting go. That because they have been so comfortable for so long, getting rich, profiting off of that relationship, that they cannot see a alternative. This is why they're doubling down, because um, they're scared. They're scared if United States does leave. Um, they are not ready. They're not ready to accept a new order in West Asia where it will be dominated by Iran. Which they had for decades, helping U.S. to contain, to sanction, to
correct.
strangle. So that's what it is. It's prompt by fear to have them to duck into their heels, and double down. But sooner or later, the reality they will have to face reality.
Yeah.
I just don't see how U.S. can continue this sustainably over the long term for all the reasons that we listed about.
Yeah. And also, these Gulf countries don't really have any energy self sufficiency. I mean, if you look at China, China has been really, really smart how it has progressed over the years. It's got like the total energy, 18% is produced by renewables, but electricity is around 35% from renewables. So it's been really smart the way it has progressed. Whereas these Gulf countries, despite having all these large bags of cash, they haven't really invested that much in
Well,
technology and infrastructure. Yeah,
they're rich because of the hydrocarbon resources. Well, guess
correct.
what? They can't sell those hydrocarbon resources like before. Now you can't eat oil. You cannot eat oil or gas. You cannot convert that into food or water. If you cannot trade it. And that's a dilemma they have right now. Right now, Saudi Arabia do have a alternative pipeline that allows them to pipe the oil and gas from the Persian Gulf region to the Red Sea coast. Um, it's a much smaller capacity, but there's some flow. But so far, this is because Houthis, the Yemeni, haven't stepped in yet.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yemen can easily close down the Red Sea route as well. UAE also built a alternative pipeline to prepare, to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. This is why Iran has been hitting UAE very hard. They made sure to shut down that UAE's alternative pipeline to the other side of the Strait Hormuz. So yeah, Iran demonstrated that they do have control. They are the ones in charge. That's what as for China, this is where China do stand to benefit, because there's a lot of Gulf money that looking for a way to get out. They're looking for those Gulf capital will now look for before Dubai has kind of tried to build itself as a financial capital, financial hub of West Asia. And now with Dubai getting hit by Iranian missiles and drones, that prospect of it remain the financial hub is increasingly unlikely. So a lot of this Gulf money will probably go toward Asia, either Southeast Asia or China. This has actually been reported by Bloomberg, and because China presents itself as a bedrock of stability right now. There's no danger of war in East Asia, and China is the anchor of peace and stability. And China also, on top of that, they have the control over the industrial manufacturing supply chain.
Correct.
So more capital will go to China. More capital will go to Southeast Asia. That's another silver lining, if you will, from this move.
Yeah, and also with Houthis, around 30% of world's internet passes through the internet cables across Red Sea. If Houthis want, they can just destroy everything. So there will be no communication between that part of the world and the rest of the world. No banking, no financial transaction. That will be really, really bad for the world if Houthis try to do that. If America and Israel try to prolong the war, not sure what's going to happen. I guess
again. Those who can destroy a thing controls it. Yemeni show that they actually control the Red Sea route, just as Iranians had demonstrated they control the Strait of Hormuz. So that's what Israel and United States have to deal with at this moment.
Right. Thanks very much, Carl. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I'll give you the last word. Whatever you want to say.
I after all that, I still hope the conflict can wrap up quickly, because my concern is for the negative impact on the rest of the world, especially the issue with chemical fertilizers, because this could cause food shortage all across the globe, but the people in the global South country will be hit particularly hard. A lot of people spend majority of their income on food, particularly in the global South, and we're going to see price rise that we haven't seen before. We are basically heading back into the era of oil shock in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, back then it was the OPEC countries that they turn the tap off. They didn't destroy the oil infrastructure. So this actually will likely be worse than the oil shock of the 1970s, because it will probably last longer. It will take longer to bring everything back online. And just remember, back in the 1970s, that actually pushed a whole series of changes all around the globe. It caused stagnant inflation in United States. people had to economize on the fuel usage. That actually allowed the Japanese car brands to dominate because they were producing fuel efficient cars. This is a bonus for China because China has a dominance over EV right now. This is where another area where Elon Musk screwed up because he pioneered the EV industry, and then he decided to throw his support behind a candidate who is anti-EV, and then destroy his brand outside of the United States. And now we're at a time where when the people around the world is like, oh crap, we need EVs. And they're not buying Elon Musk cars because because his association with Trump. So it's funny how things work.
Yep. No, thanks very much, Carl. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I'll stop recording now. Thanks.